If you wait to feel like it, you'll never do it. If you wait for the fire to show up, you'll spend your whole life cold. Motivation is not the spark. It's the smoke, the illusion that something is burning. But when you chase smoke, you forget that real transformation comes from the flame, and flames are built with structure, not feeling. That's why you don't wait for motivation. You build a system. Because if your life is driven by how you feel in the moment, you will never rise. You will drift, you will delay, and you will die with your dreams still in your hands. You don't need more motivation. You need a better method. You need to make discipline automatic. You need to make excellence normal. You need to make action inevitable. Motivation is a mood. Systems are laws. And systems don't care how you feel. They don't ask you if you're tired. They don't negotiate with your excuses. They don't beg for your best day. They execute. Because they are built on principle, not preference. Your life is a mirror of the systems you've allowed, or the chaos you've tolerated. Look around. Is your day designed for greatness, or is it reacting to whatever hits first? Is your morning sacred or sloppy? Is your schedule tight and powerful, or loose and powerless? Are your priorities written in code or floating in chaos? If you want a better life, don't wait for the mood. Build the mechanism. Structure your energy before it leaks. Guard your attention before it scatters. Own your hours before the world steals them. That's what high performers do. Not because they're more gifted, but because they are more intentional. They don't rise by chance. They rise by choice. And every choice is locked inside a system. Because systems are safety nets for your standards. They keep you aligned when the storm hits. They hold you together when motivation dies. They remove decision fatigue so that greatness is never optional, it's operational. You don't become elite by trying harder. You become elite by deciding once and then building systems that make that decision automatic. You don't set goals, you build gates. Gates that only let the right energy in. Gates that filter your focus. Gates that lock out distraction. That's why you must stop asking, how can I stay motivated? Start asking, how can I make action the default? How can I make the hard things easier to begin? How can I make my future self thankful, not resentful? Because every action you take is casting a vote for the system you serve. You're either building a life by design or you're surrendering to a life by default. There is no in between. And it starts with mindset. The system begins with the way you think when the alarm rings and you don't feel ready. When the pressure is high and no one's coming to rescue you. When the world around you is chaotic, but your internal compass says, I know who I am and I know what I do. Because mindset is the architect of all systems. Without the right mindset, even the best tools become toys. You'll buy planners and never use them. You'll start routines and never finish them. You'll build vision boards with no vehicles to reach them. But with the right mindset, even a blank notebook becomes a blueprint. Even a 4 a.m. alarm becomes an advantage. Even silence becomes your sanctuary. The right mindset doesn't need hype. It needs order. It doesn't seek feelings, it seeks flow. It doesn't ask the world to slow down, it trains itself to speed up strategically. Because systems don't remove the struggle. They make the struggle scalable. They don't avoid pain, they repurpose it. They turn every friction point into a feedback loop. They turn every breakdown into a dashboard light that says, look here, fix this, tighten the bolts. Because when your system is strong, you don't fall apart, you recalibrate. And when you recalibrate enough, you begin to rise. And when you rise with a system beneath you, you stop fearing failure because failure is just data. It's not devastation. It's not destruction. It's simply a signal that the system needs tuning. Because that's the beauty of building your life on structure. Nothing is wasted. Every misstep becomes intelligence. Every delay becomes a lesson in timing. Every closed door becomes a rerouting mechanism, not a rejection, but a redirection. Systems don't remove emotion. They organize it. They give your fire a furnace. They give your chaos a calendar. They give your purpose a path. That's why the most successful people aren't the most excited, they're the most engineered. They've built systems for mindset, systems for energy, systems for communication, systems for recovery, systems for saying yes, and more importantly, systems for saying no. Because without a system, you say yes to everything, and excellence dies in the flood of unfiltered obligations. But with a system, you say yes to the right things, the things that move the needle, the things that multiply momentum, the things that feed the mission, not just stroke the ego. And when your yes becomes sacred, your results become supernatural. That's what happens when your life runs on structure instead of emotion. You no longer beg for inspiration. You create it. You no longer fear burnout. You build boundaries before you break. You no longer chase success. You become the type of person it chases. But it's not automatic, it's engineered. You must choose this. You must sit down with your life and design it. You must audit every habit and ask, is this aligned with who I'm becoming? Is this serving my future or sedating my potential? Is this action reinforcing excellence or rehearsing excuses? Because your system is your sermon. It tells the world what you really believe, not in theory, but in execution. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your systems. And if your systems are weak, your success is a ticking clock. But if your systems are strong, your momentum becomes inevitable. That's how you turn greatness from a goal into a guarantee. Not with hype, not with hustle, but with habits. Habits built not on impulse, but on intention. Habits that support your identity. Habits that multiply your margin. Habits that build the life you said you wanted, whether you feel like it today or not. And that's the real test, isn't it? Can you move when the fire's gone? Can you execute when the music fades? Can you show up when it's boring, when it's quiet, when it's hard? Because that's when the system proves its worth. Anyone can act when they're inspired. But those who've built systems, they act no matter what. Not because they're better, but because they've made it easier to be consistent than to collapse. They've rigged their environment for victory. They've removed friction. They've simplified the hard. They've designed their days for discipline. And discipline is what makes motivation irrelevant. Because discipline, real discipline, is freedom. Not the kind of freedom that comes from doing whatever you want. The kind that comes from becoming who you were meant to be. And that identity, that potential, it doesn't come alive with scattered willpower. It comes alive when your days are directed by clarity. Clarity is the compass that gives your system purpose. It answers the questions most people never ask. What am I actually building? Why does this matter? What's the cost of not doing this? Without clarity, your system becomes a cage, a set of robotic habits, a monotonous grind. But with clarity, your system becomes a catapult. It launches you into alignment. It protects your time. It fuels your fire. Clarity doesn't give you more hours. It gives your hours more meaning. It gives your yes more weight and your no more authority. And when you have clarity, you stop being busy and start being precise. You don't just fill your schedule, you stack significance into every moment. Because clarity turns your time into investment, not just activity. And that investment compounds when it's rooted in vision. Vision is not about fantasy. It's not about some distant goal on the horizon that you hope to reach one day. Vision is when you decide what kind of life you're building, and you structure your present to match that future. Vision is when your future becomes so real in your spirit, your current reality starts to feel temporary, not in frustration, but in focus. You stop reacting to your environment. You stop explaining your dreams to people who don't have the capacity to see them. You stop settling for average because you've seen what's possible and it haunts you in the best way. Vision turns your system into a strategy. And strategy beats intensity every time. Because vision gives your life velocity. It gives your habits heat. It turns discipline from drudgery into devotion. You don't wake up because you have to. You wake up because you're called to. You don't grind to prove something, you build because you already know who you are. That's the shift. That's the root of every system that lasts. Identity. Your system isn't there to fix you, it's there to reveal you. To extract the version of you that doesn't rise and fall with emotion. The version of you that keeps building, even when it's slow. The version of you that doesn't need external reward to walk in internal excellence. Because when vision meets identity, and identity fuels action, that's where purpose lives. Not in theory, in motion. Purpose doesn't need to be found. It needs to be expressed. And you express it through your system, not just in what you do, but in how you do everything. You organize your space with purpose. You speak with purpose. You eat, move, rest, create, all with purpose. Because your life is no longer a series of reactions. It's a ritual of becoming, a ritual of showing up as the person your future demands even when your feelings resist. A ritual of saying, I don't rise when I feel like it. I rise because I've chosen who I am. And that choice, that's the doorway to real transformation. Because real transformation doesn't happen when you set a goal. It happens when you stop negotiating with the parts of yourself that would rather stay the same. It happens when your system becomes a daily declaration of war against mediocrity. When your calendar becomes a contract with your future self. When every routine is a reminder, this is who I am now. Because purpose is not passion, it's position. It's where you stand when everything around you says to sit. It's the fire you feed when no one's cheering. It's the standard you uphold when no one's watching. Purpose turns your system into more than a routine. It becomes your ritual of remembrance. A daily remembering that you are not here to float. You are not here to dabble. You are not here to participate passively in your own story. You are here to architect your atmosphere. You are here to lead your life like it matters. You are here to build something that outlasts your feelings. And you do that not once, not when you're in the mood, but every single day. That's why systems matter more than motivation. Because purpose without structure becomes poetry without muscle. It sounds nice, it feels good, but it doesn't move anything. But purpose with structure, now you're dangerous. Now your habits hum with intent. Now your boundaries have bite. Now your time becomes sacred, not scheduled, sacred. You stop letting people throw things on your plate. You decide what gets your energy. You don't let urgency override legacy. You don't let chaos dictate character. Because now you have a system. And that system is not just a planner or a checklist. It's a philosophy. It's the unspoken contract between who you are today and who you refuse to die without becoming. It's the architecture of your identity, not the cage of your obligation. It's what lets you keep walking forward even when the wind hits, even when the reward is slow, even when the doubts whisper louder than the faith. Because you're not living for motivation anymore. You're living for mission. And mission doesn't wait to feel ready. Mission moves. Mission builds. Mission commits before clarity, endures before breakthrough, and shows up before applause. That's how real change happens. Not from hype, but from habit. Not from noise, but from nuance. Not from what you say you believe, but from what your systems prove. Because your system is your statement. It tells the truth when your mouth can't. It reveals your loyalty, not to comfort, but to calling. It's what keeps you steady in storms, focused in fog, and firm when fear knocks. And that steadiness, that focus, that firmness, it's not magic. It's not talent. It's not luck. It's structure. And you built it. You built it. And because you built it, no one can take it from you. Not the economy. Not your boss. Not the critics who never dared to build anything of their own. Because what you've built is internal. It's invisible to the lazy, but unshakable to those who understand. You don't collapse under pressure, you tighten your process. You don't beg for motivation, you activate your system. And the system, it never sleeps. It never makes excuses. It never needs to be inspired because it runs on decision, not emotion. It runs on identity, not impulse. It runs on the power of a person who said, I'm done hoping for change. I'm done waiting for the mood. I'm done wasting energy trying to feel ready. I'm building something no one sees yet. And I'll keep building when it's boring, when it's heavy, when it's silent. Because this life is mine to shape. You rise. You sharpen. You serve. You build momentum. Not from motivation, but from mastery. And mastery doesn't happen in breakthroughs. It happens in boring. In the quiet early mornings. In the moments where no one's clapping. In the hundreds of reps that the world will never post, but that you will never forget. Because they are the proof. The proof that you didn't just hope for transformation, you engineered it. You didn't just ask for more discipline, you designed for it. You didn't just try to change, you structured your soul for the shift. And now you don't need to feel like it, because you are it. You are the standard. You are the structure. You are the storm, because you didn't wait for motivation. You built a system. There is a lie, quiet, logical, and lethal, that has been spoon-fed to you since the day you first opened your eyes. A lie disguised as responsibility, masked as adulthood. A lie so normalized, it's etched into your calendar, your paycheck, your posture. And that lie is this: just survive. Just get through the week. Just make enough. Just hold your breath until Friday. Just don't fall behind. Just make it to retirement and hope you're still breathing when it gets here. But that lie was never meant for you. That lie was built to keep you tame, to keep you predictable, to keep you tired, obedient, and numb. And you've been feeling it, haven't you? That nagging pulse beneath the monotony. That electric hunger that refuses to die, no matter how exhausted your body is from the daily grind. That isn't stress. That's your spirit rebelling against the cage of survival, because you weren't born to survive. You were born to evolve, to build, to break old patterns and step into new power, to turn work into worship, to make your life a sculpture of self-mastery. This isn't about more hustle. This isn't about glamorizing busyness. This is about taking back the pen from the system and writing your own code. You are not a machine. You are not a number. You are not here to pay bills and die politely. You are here to ascend. And every single day you keep showing up just to survive instead of to stretch, to sharpen, to awaken. You are slowly selling off the parts of yourself that were meant to shake the world. You've been taught that work is a cage, a sacrifice, a necessary evil, something you drag yourself through in order to earn tiny, exhausted weekends and temporary relief. And slowly over time, they conditioned you to believe that trading time for money was noble, that stress was a badge of honor, and burnout was just the price of adulthood. But that's a lie sold by the lifeless. Work was never supposed to drain you. It was meant to shape you. You weren't made to clock in and decay. You were made to create, to conquer, to craft each hour of labor into a stairway toward a higher version of yourself. But you can't build that kind of life if your only goal is to make it through the day. Survival is not enough. It will never be enough. Because deep down, there's a voice in you that knows you were made for more than existing. You were made for expanding. Every man and woman was born with something divine, the power to become. But survival shuts that down. Survival makes you small. It makes you reactive. It teaches you to stop dreaming and start defending. And so you go to work, not with fire, but with fatigue. Not with vision, but with resignation. You punch the clock like a ghost wearing your name. And every day you tolerate that. Your edges dull. Your courage weakens. Your light dims. Until one day you look in the mirror and can't recognize the eyes, staring back not because they've aged, but because they've stopped evolving. But not you. Not anymore. Because something in you is done being numb. Done mistaking safety for success. Done confusing just enough with peace. And that is where the real change begins. Not in motivation, not in hype, but in disgust. Disgust with mediocrity. Disgust with survival. disgust with waking up tired of the life you built. That's when the fire returns. That's when work becomes sacred. That's when every day becomes a battlefield where your old self dies and your new self rises. You don't work to escape poverty, you work to escape the old version of you. You don't work for a paycheck, you work to sharpen your character. You work to break the laziness you inherited, to uproot the fear you were taught, to build habits so powerful they become your armor. You work to bury doubt and resurrect belief. You work to create momentum that even your pain can't stop. That's what it means to evolve. Not just to make more, but to become more. And yes, it's hard. Yes, it's exhausting. But so is regret. So is staying small. So is watching other people live a life you were too afraid to build. So choose your hard. Choose the one that makes you bigger. Choose the one that demands you grow. Because that's the price of greatness. Not luck, not comfort, but discipline, faith, vision, obsession. The willingness to rise when others sleep. The clarity to work when others wander. The courage to show up not for survival, but for evolution. You weren't given this life to blend in, pay taxes, and disappear. You were given this life to rebuild it, day by day, into a force that defies the script. You were meant to take every ounce of pain, every setback, every moment of being overlooked, and alchemize it into power. That's the difference between those who evolve and those who endure. The ones who endure wear their pain like chains. The ones who evolve, they wear it like armor. They don't run from work. They run to it. Because they understand the goal was never to escape difficulty. The goal was to become the kind of person who could carry it with grace, with focus, with ferocity. And evolution demands that. It demands sweat. It demands tears you don't post about. It demands decisions made in silence when no one's watching, when there's no trophy waiting, when your body screams and your mind says, stop. That's where the transformation begins. Not in the spotlight, but in the shadows, where you choose who you'll become when there's nothing left to prove. You stop showing up to impress. You show up to build. You don't perform for claps. You perform because your future demands it. You stop chasing pleasure and start pursuing purpose. Because here's the truth, they won't tell you the paycheck isn't the reward. You are the reward. The person you're becoming while you work. The courage you're developing when you show up tired. The character you're crafting when you choose excellence over ease. The mindset you're building when you stop waiting for motivation and start commanding your day. You could double your income and still be poor in discipline. You could win applause and still be starving for peace. But when you work to evolve, when every action is aimed at becoming someone sharper, stronger, more aligned, then every dollar, every minute, every drop of sweat becomes sacred. This is not just about working hard. Plenty of people grind themselves into dust and never grow. This is about working with intention, with alignment, with the awareness that your work is either breaking you down or building you up. That every choice, how you eat, how you speak, how you think, how you move, is either reinforcing the version of you that survives or fueling the one that evolves. So choose. Every day, choose. Choose the early morning when your body wants sleep. Choose the hard truth when lying would be easier. Choose silence when noise is tempting. Choose reading when scrolling feels good. Choose practice over performance. Choose preparation over procrastination. Because those choices, they add up. They become you. Not overnight. Not dramatically, but gradually until one day, without ceremony, without fanfare, you wake up and realize you have evolved. And no one can take that from you. Not the economy, not your boss, not your past, not your parents. Because evolution is internal, permanent, earned. And once you become that person, the one who built themselves with discipline, with fire, with obsession, you will never again settle for survival. You will only settle for ascent. You don't evolve by chance. You evolve by design, by rewriting the code of who you are with every action. You evolve when you stop seeking permission to rise and start rising without applause. You evolve when you look at the things you used to tolerate and say, not anymore, because evolution begins with elimination, not addition. You don't become more by doing more. You become more by cutting the dead weight, the distractions, the false friendships, the pointless habits, the emotional clutter, the invisible cages. You don't need another hack, you need clarity. You don't need a plan for next year. You need a decision for today. And that decision, it is simple but not easy. You must decide that you will no longer settle for the version of you that clocks in and checks out. That you will not let the calendar dictate your character. That you will not measure your life by your salary, but by your standard. Because your life, your real life, doesn't live in your resume. It lives in your rituals, in the quiet disciplines no one sees, in the hours you spend sharpening the sword while others are sleeping in the reps you do when no one claps. That's where identity is formed, not in the spotlight, but in the shadows, not in the wins, but in the warfare. This isn't about balance, this is about alignment. Because when you are aligned with your purpose, you don't burn out, you burn brighter. You don't need breaks to escape, you need momentum to build. You don't count hours, you command them. Because every hour is a hammer. And you are either using that hammer to build your future or to beat down your potential with procrastination. And it shows. It always shows. You can't fake alignment. People can smell it in your posture, in your pace, in your eyes. They don't need to read your resume. They feel your presence. And presence is only built in the fire of discipline. It is only earned through relentless self-respect, not self-esteem, not self-care, self-respect. And that only comes from doing what your weaker self avoids, from living like your future self is already watching, from becoming so consistent in your standards that compromise becomes offensive to your soul. This is evolution, not a new you, but the real you, finally emerging, unapologetically, unrelentingly. And that emergence, it will cost you. It will cost your laziness. It will cost your comfort. It will cost your old circle, your old thinking, your old story. But what you gain in return is worth every drop. Power. Not power over others, power over yourself. Power to move with purpose. Power to choose clarity over chaos. Power to walk into the unknown and know who you are. There's a point you reach where the noise can't reach you anymore, where the opinions of strangers lose their grip, where the old fears go quiet. And it's not because the world changes, it's because you do. You no longer respond like the person who needed validation. You no longer flinch like the person who feared failure. You no longer pause like the person who used to wait for motivation. Because now, you've become someone who moves from principle, someone who acts out of alignment, someone who doesn't need the weather to be perfect to keep walking because the mission is bigger than the moment. And this kind of transformation, this evolution, it does not arrive with fanfare. It shows up in the mundane, in the silence. In the early alarms, the cold showers, the lonely walks, the thousands of times you do the right thing and no one knows. That's the difference. People who work to survive only act when there's a reward. But those who evolve, they act because it's who they are. They act in darkness, in discomfort, in delay. And that consistency, that non-negotiable pursuit becomes their crown. You think getting rich is about money? It's not. It's about identity. Because the wealthy are not paid by chance. They are paid in proportion to the pressure they've learned to carry. They are rewarded for their habits, not their hopes. And until you evolve into the kind of person who can sustain wealth, you will always sabotage it. It's not about how much you can make. It's about how much you can manage. And that management begins in the mirror. Not with spreadsheets, but with standards. If you can't manage your mouth, your sleep, your time, your attitude, how can you manage abundance? The discipline you avoid today is the ceiling on your future. So no, you don't work to survive. You don't show up to keep bills paid. You show up to outgrow who you were yesterday. You work to sharpen your systems. You work to stretch your faith. You work to earn the trust of your own reflection. Because that trust, that's where real power lives. When you can look yourself in the eyes and say, I showed up. I did the work. I kept my vow. That's wealth. That's freedom. That's evolution. And when that becomes your new normal, everything changes. Your posture shifts. Your voice deepens. You speak with fewer words, but more weight. You no longer sell your value, you live it. You no longer chase, you attract. You no longer ask, you embody. That's the turning point. That's the day you cross over. From worker to warrior. From survivor to strategist. From participant to producer. You stop reacting to life and you start rebuilding it in your image. There is a version of you that exists on the other side of your current discipline. A version that doesn't flinch when challenges come. A version that doesn't waste time explaining his standards. A version that doesn't beg life to be easier because he's become stronger. And that version is not built in a day. He is built in the repetition, in the refusal to be average. In the hard conversations, the daily routines, the emotional self-control that no one applauds, he is built in the decision to stop living at the mercy of circumstance and start living at the command of vision. You don't need more time. You need more intention. You don't need more followers. You need more focus. You don't need to wait until Monday, next month, next year. That's what survivors say. But the one who evolves, they say now, today, this hour. They use what they have. They stretch what they carry. They stop cursing their limitations and start leveraging them. Because evolution doesn't require perfect conditions. It only requires a willing decision. And that decision rewrites everything. You start waking up not just to survive the schedule, but to seize the standard. You start working not to impress the world, but to match your calling. Your nutrition changes. Your finances change. Your conversations change. Your use of time becomes sacred. You start pulling away from shallow people, empty habits, and cheap escapes. Not because you're better, but because you've seen what's possible. And once you see it, you cannot go back. You begin to respect your energy. You begin to curate your inputs. You begin to master the clock. You no longer have time for drama, doubt, or delay because you are now in the becoming. That sacred process where your days become aligned, your actions become loud, and your presence becomes a sermon to anyone paying attention. You are no longer trying to find yourself. You are forging yourself. And every ounce of resistance you face becomes proof that you are alive, that you are not settling, that you are not surviving, that you are ascending. You will know you've begun to evolve when the things that used to attract you now disgust you, when shortcuts feel cheap, when easy praise sounds hollow, when weekends feel like wasted ground if they don't move you closer to who you're becoming. That's the shift. That's the moment survival is no longer enough, and you begin to crave clarity. Because once you've tasted the strength of a life lived on purpose, everything else is noise. Everything else is a compromise. And the person who evolves understands every compromise is a seed. And those seeds don't stay small. They grow into patterns, into character, into destiny. So you stop planting things you don't want to harvest. And the work becomes sacred. Not because it's glamorous, but because it's yours. You stop clocking in for a boss and start clocking in for a legacy. You stop performing for likes and start performing for the man you see in the mirror. You stop surviving Monday through Friday just to binge on the weekends, and you start seeing every single day as an opportunity to step deeper into the life your old self didn't have the courage to build. It's not about chasing wealth. It's about becoming wealth, becoming valuable, becoming the kind of person who doesn't wait for abundance, they attract it. And not because they're lucky, but because they're worthy. Because they've trained, they've sacrificed, they've sharpened, they've stayed when others quit. They've pushed when others paused. They've mastered themselves in silence while the world was sleeping, and now their results make noise louder than any words could. The ones who evolve don't explain their grind. They don't broadcast every step. They don't need your applause. Their lives announce them. Their energy enters the room before their mouth does. Their presence changes the temperature of every table they sit at because they're not here to fit in. They're here to build a standard, to raise the bar so high that excuses can't survive in the same room. Because when you've truly evolved, your discipline becomes a mirror, and everyone around you is forced to confront what they've been avoiding. And now you know. You know that you were never supposed to settle, that survival was never your ceiling, that you weren't born to drift, to repeat, to make it through. You were born to build, to sharpen, to lead. You weren't here to fit the mold, you were made to break it. And the work you do, it was never just about money. It was never just about goals. It was never just about getting ahead. The work was about the becoming, about shedding the layers of comfort, of fear, of old stories you no longer owe anything to. You didn't come this far just to pay bills and play small. You didn't wake up one more time today just to breathe through another average day. You're still here because there's more of you left to become, more of you to unlock, more ground to take, more people to impact, more evidence to leave behind that you were here and you built something that lasted. So let them watch, let them wonder, let them doubt, but never again let them outlast you. Never again let your old self speak louder than your current discipline. Never again let survival have the final word in a life that was meant to roar. This is your new code. This is your new rhythm. This is your final vow. I do not work to survive. I work to evolve, and I will never go back.